If you want to stay healthy and fit well into old age, you can do a lot to make this happen. Everyone knows that. A healthy diet, regular exercise, sufficient sleep, mental recovery phases, basic nutritional supplements, and regular checkups at the doctor. Clear. But that's not the whole story. Top scientists around the world are studying completely new ways of delaying aging. In other words, how we can prevent more and more age-related diseases from affecting us over the years. And if you want to delay aging, you have to understand aging right down to the level of the individual cell. Once we know what goes wrong over the years, we can also find ways to prevent it. This is exactly what the top scientists at the IMB, the Institute of Molecular Biology in Mainz, are doing. You will see, molecular biology is a complex thing which can be extremely exciting. Otherwise, these three wouldn't be here. Here is a leading figure, namely the director of the Center for Healthy Aging, to which the IMB belongs, Professor of Molecular Biology, Dr. Christoph Niers. Welcome.
Hello, Nina.
One of the 27 top scientists affiliated with IMB, also Professor of Molecular Biology. He comes from Canada, Dr. Brian Luke. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
And she is a PhD student with Brian Luke. So she has 2 degrees, master degrees in molecular biology, one from the IMB, one from Kansas City. She was born in the US. Christy Jansen, hello.
Hi, Nina. Happy to be here.
Let's first understand what you are studying, researching, and what fascinates you so much about what you are doing. Professor Niers, who among your relatives has not yet completely understood what you are working on?
Well, I guess one example would be my mother-in-law. I guess I would explain her that I work here at the Institute of Molecular Biology, or IMB, which is an unusual institute. It's what was called a private-public partnership between the Boehringer Ingelheim Foundation and the state of Rhineland-Palatinate, which are co-funding this institute, which is called also a Center of Excellence. And the main topics that we are pursuing here are called genome stability on the one hand and epigenetics on the other hand. Now that to my mother-in-law would sound complicated, but she would rather understand what genome means, our DNA, the blueprint that makes us what we are. And in genome stability, we try to understand of what prevents our DNA from accumulating lesions and staying healthy without getting mutations. And epigenetics is the field where we are trying to understand the wiring diagram, the wiring plan that connects our genome, the genes within the genome, with each other, because that wiring diagram is different in every tissue. And we're trying to understand what is the nature of the wires, so to speak, and what is the wiring plan on the other hand. And one of the model systems that we are using in our laboratory are actually frogs, more specifically frog embryos and tadpoles. And we are using this system because we are trying to identify and characterize universal features of epigenetic regulation and more specifically also aging. And most recently, for example, we have discovered that the famous epigenetic clock that is now established as one of the best molecular markers for biological aging is also conserved and occurs in the frog as it does in humans. So despite the fact that frogs and humans are hundreds of millions of years different in terms of evolutionary history, they share this universal feature of this epigenetic clock, which would indicate there's something very fundamental to this epigenetic aging program, which we can now try to understand and characterize also in frog embryos, which are much easier to study than are humans.
So your mother-in-law will be very happy to understand from epigenetic clocks up to frogs what you are doing.
I hope so.
Chrissy, to whom would you like to explain what you are doing in a very understandable way?
So I have lots of conversations with my children, my two daughters, and especially my 5-year-old. She's very curious and very observant. I mean, we don't talk about the details of what I work on, but we talk on about things that are related. So, for example, we were recently in the garden because she loves to garden, and she observed that there was a basil plant that had turned pink, and she asked me why this basil plant had turned pink, and I could explain to her that, you know, this was because of damage that occurred in that plant. Basically, the plant had a sunburn, just like she gets a sunburn. And for her, this was completely astounding that she and basil have something in common.
And what would you respond when she asks you, why are you doing that, Mom?
So I tell her that the reason I'm a scientist and the reason I have to go to work and she has to go to kindergarten every day is because we're here working on basic processes to understand how cells work, with the hope that we can understand what goes wrong when people get sick and how to make them feel better, but even better, to prevent them from getting sick in the first place.
Oh, I have a great mom. Your daughter says. Brian,
Yes.
you're teaching a lot of students in the University of Mainz. How do you introduce what you are working on in your lab to the very fresh beginner students?
Right, so this is something that I do indeed do. So whether it be to the fresh students, the bachelor students, or whether it be to the master students, I start almost every course or every lecture with telling them a little bit about the research that we do in the lab. And I do this for two reasons. So one, I think it's important that the students understand what research is going on at the University of Mainz and in Mainz, because otherwise we just interact with them sort of teaching textbook knowledge, and they don't really get exposed to the research. And this is really helpful for them because then they can make better choices about where they're going to do their bachelor, where they're going to do their master work. The other reason I do it, though, is because I'd like to try to get them a little bit excited, because when I'm talking about my research, then I'm quite passionate and I get excited, maybe a bit overexcited. But nonetheless, I really hope that they will sort of feel this energy and get inspired and see that it can actually be fun to do research. And I also try to tell them a little bit about, you know, what this means in the bigger picture. So yeah, I regularly do this at the beginning of every course.
Yeah, I hope you're a little bit infectious for everybody in the university. People are getting older and older all over the world, including Africa and South America, but the health span is not keeping up. The years of suffering from multiple age-related diseases are increasing. Soon the costs of treatment and care will explode to such an extent that no country in the world will be able to afford it. You are the scientists working on the solution, keeping people around the world healthy for longer. How do we get there? Brian?
Well, that of course is a very complicated problem and difficult question. How do we get there? So I think, you know, what's first important to understand is that at first glance, aging is a very complicated process, right? I mean, as we get older, we see that many things start changing and not working as well. For example, our skin gets a bit more wrinkly, our hair starts to turn gray. Now, these are, of course, minor effects that we can all live with, but more serious things happen as well. I mean, the cardiovascular system isn't as efficient. You know, our liver isn't working as efficiently. Sometimes people experience kidney dysfunction. So these are more complicated and severe problems. And so at first glance, this seems very overwhelming and very complicated because so many different parts of the body are changing and not working well. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. And the light is that you can drastically simplify this because, in fact, it doesn't matter in which part of the body you look, whether it be the hair, whether it be the kidney, the liver. If you look at the level of the tissue and at the level of the cells, it's always the same processes that start to function and act differently. And these are very fundamental and basic processes, and they deal with things that Christoph has already alluded to. Making sure that, so what starts to happen as we age is we start to get more damaged DNA. The ends of the chromosomes don't work as well as they used to. Proteins don't work as well as they once did. And also just turning genes on and off isn't going as good as it should. So the good news is it's really these 4 basic principles that we need to focus on. And I think, to answer now, come back to your question, I think this is how we do it. We focus on these 4 fundamental problems, and we learn as much as we can about how they work. And like this, we're going to really understand more about why they aren't working so properly as we age.
Christy, please prevent us from depression as well. Do you add something?
Yeah, I think that if we're talking about how to save on medical expenses and how to have a longer health span and age in a way that isn't, costing the healthcare system large amounts of money, we really need to focus on finding interventions that aren't medical in nature. And to do that, I think we also need to understand how the environment, how the food that we're eating, how the plastic that we're heating our food up in is affecting these basic cellular processes. So it's really important that we understand the processes, but that we also look at how our environment is affecting those things and how we can change that environment so that we're intervening in a non-medical way.
Mm-hmm. And Christoph?
Yeah, maybe on a more general level, I would say that at one point, what people want to see ideally is a pill on the market that makes us age in a more healthy fashion. And one problem there is that aging has never been in the past considered a disease, but some physiological normal process that can go more or less right. And if you're unlucky, then you end up with chronic diseases, which will drag on forever. But that's multiple of them, so-called multimorbidity. But that's something that we have to simply to live with because that's part of being human. But that notion is now slowly changing. The WHO, for example, is now defining aging also as a disease and opening, in other words, also the doors to do something about it. And this in the past has prevented also clinical trials from being conducted because it was considered unethical to give to healthy probants or individuals some compound, some drug that should be tested if they are apparently not suffering from any disease, and there, with any drug, always potential side effects. So would it be ethical to apply such treatments to people that do not have any obvious disease? Now this has been now changing. There's the first trial going on in the United States, the so-called TAME trial, where the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the United States of America, has endorsed such a clinical trial where I think 3,000 individuals are being treated with a drug called metformin. Now, metformin is an anti-diabetic drug that is very well studied, and it is known to have very few side effects. So therefore, the FDA has judged that it is relatively safe to apply such a drug even to healthy individuals. And since there are very good evidences from various types of model systems, including mammalian organisms where metformin has been shown to prevent or delay aging symptoms, to give it a shot and test out whether metformin treatment over a certain period is actually improving and preventing health related disease in this large population. And it will be very exciting to find out what's going on there and what the outcome is, and if there is a beneficial effect of the metformin in this TAME study. I think it will be a door opener also for future trials. So the notion is out there, and there's a paradigm shift with regard to aging being considered something that may be treatable in the future, also with medication.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So the IMB is considered as Center of Excellence for Life Sciences. I now understand why. They want to give more life to the years and not more years to the life. You're not interested in whether we could live up to 120 or even 150 years. The media likes to portray it in another way around. And that can damage your reputation, can't it?
Yes, there's a misconception by using the term longevity research, because it insinuates that what life science researchers that are in the aging field try to achieve is to make us live 150, 200 years old or so. But that's not the aim. The aim is really to shorten the time that we are sick once we are aging, to shorten the disease time. And we have observed that over the past 100 years, the average lifespan of people in the Western societies has doubled from around 40 years of age on average to now on average around 80 years of age. So clearly there is improvement possible with regard to the average lifespan. In the same period, the maximal lifespan of humans has not changed at all. It is still at the 120 years approximately since 100 years, and there's not much change seen there. In other words, there seems to be a fundamental biological barrier there of the maximal lifespan, which is biologically speaking different from the average lifespan. And so what we are trying to work on also in those that work on so-called longevity research is to, yes, make maybe people achieve that magic hallmark, that a boundary of 120 years more and more, and do so in a healthy fashion.
And Christy, fortunately, more and more women are studying biochemistry, molecular biology, genetics. I guess that's really great. Explain to us why you chose this avenue.
So I was inspired at a very young age, just watching, my family, the people around me. I was exposed to my grandparents having many of these aging-related diseases. There was cancer and diabetes and chronic heart failure and also dementia. And these all happened when I was in my teens and deciding what I wanted to do with my life. And this was really eye-opening for me and really a huge motivation to lead me at least into the biology. At the time, I of course didn't know if I wanted to go into the medical field or into research, but I was fortunate enough to have a lot of extremely valuable mentors when I was really young. And I think as a woman, it's very important that you have role models who you can aspire to be like and who look like you and who, you can see yourself being that person.
And you got that.
I did, and I was so fortunate to have really great mentors when I was really young. And, hopefully someday I'm also able to provide that to other young, aspiring scientists.
Christoph, you are the head of the CHA, the Center for Healthy Aging, and the IMB, the Institute of Molecular Biology. Why is Mainz a great place for aging research?
Mainz is really becoming a hub for aging research, and not only for aging research specifically, but also for life science in general. With the foundation of the IMB some 15 years ago, and the generous finances that and budget that the Boehringer Ingelheim Foundation has provided, and not only to the IMB, but also to the University of Mainz. This has allowed to really flourish life science research here over the last decade or so. The IMB, as a center of excellence, is attracting top scientists that come here, hundreds of PhD students from all over the world that get the training here. And we have launched, as you mentioned, the Center of Healthy Aging some years ago, which tries to network between all the scientists here on campus that contribute to aging research, with some more than 40 principal investigators and their laboratories that contribute to this. And where we are bridging basic research, people that work on aging, say, in yeast cells, up to clinicians that work with patients, and sort of bridge this famous bench to bedside gap that is often existing in other places. We are in this Center of Healthy Aging coordinating aging research. We are organizing conferences, symposia, workshops. We have joint core facilities. We promote cooperations between these different worlds of researchers, the applied researchers, the clinical researchers, and the more basic researchers, with joint funding. They may share a common PhD student that they are supervising, and that learns the best of both worlds. And also the state of Rhineland-Palatinate has realized that this is a really important issue, aging research and life science, into this research arena, and has decided to invest heavily into aging research and life science research in general here in Mainz, in the vicinity, and specifically also into aging research. This has, of course, another dynamics and boom with the COVID pandemic, where Mainz became center stage visible in the life sciences through the development via the BioNTech company and the pioneering of the first mRNA vaccine by Ugur Sahin and Özlem Türeci, that made it up on Time magazine page 1. And hence the state of Rhineland-Palatinate has decided to heavily invest into the Mainz region and convert the whole region into a life science hub. There's a life science campus which is currently developed just 5 minutes from here, where tens of thousands of square meters are currently being developed with buildings, incubators for startup companies in the life sciences and pharma, to attract outside talents and people that want to make a living in the life science arena. One important thing also with regard to aging research is a resource that we have here, which is a real treasure if you want to study aging, because obviously we cannot do experiments on humans. In the absence of being able to do experiments with humans in an aging field, we have to rely on experiments that are conducted by nature. And you can do this by making use of what is called cohorts, where you have thousands of individuals that you are studying over a certain lifetime trajectory. And there's such a cohort here that has been launched in 2007, the so-called Gutenberg study cohort of some 15,000 individuals that were all recruited as healthy individuals. And they were invited for a checkup that probably none of us will ever get in their life, because it takes over half a day. They take thousands of parameters from them. They take body fluid samples from those individuals and freeze them away. And so now this population of the Gutenberg cohort is slowly, we could say, aging away, right? And over the years, now 15 years later or so, some of them start developing typical aging-related diseases, such as dementia, cardiovascular disease, heart insufficiency, diabetes, and what have you. And now you can go back and ask, is there something in the blood samples that were taken some 15 years ago that is shared, some markers that is shared amongst all those that develop now Alzheimer, that already indicated 15 years back in those blood samples that these individuals are more likely to develop Alzheimer or diabetes or what have you. So that allows you to identify markers, and with those markers we can maybe in the future already identify people at risk for certain diseases, aging-related diseases. But we can do even more. We can take those markers, typically genes or proteins, which are such markers that can be used, and we can study what is actually the biological role. Can we modify, can we alter, can we manipulate the function of those markers to improve and intervene in the chronic aging-related diseases which would otherwise develop. So such a cohort is really a treasure, and also with this, aging research here takes a prominent position within Germany.
Yeah, really impressive. Mainz as a great place for research. Would you like to add something?
I don't know if I think Christoph really hit on everything that I could imagine saying. I mean, I can just go back to one of the comments one of the things that I was talking about earlier, and that is also the openness of all the colleagues in Mainz to interact with each other. I mean, so I think this is something that's also fantastic here, is that we're regularly meeting and sharing information and coming up with ideas of how we can work together and tackle these problems. And I think together in different systems, in different organisms, and this is something that's also working very well here.
Yeah, I think just to sort of add on to the discussion about how collaborative it is here in Mainz, we also have the IPP, the PhD program that we have here in Mainz. And in the PhD program that we have, there's a lot of symposia and get-togethers that allow us with other students to discuss the techniques, the very basic techniques that are happening. Brian maybe doesn't know on a day-to-day basis exactly what I'm doing at my bench, and that's normal. But as a PhD student, we're there doing the sort of minutiae of the lab work, and being able to communicate with other PhD students who are having the same problems or are having the same successes is really important. And as a member of the IPP, we have a lot of opportunities to sort of communicate these things with other PhD students who are in similar situations. And I think the community here for PhD students is just really phenomenal.
Question to all the three artists here. What would be your dream regarding how your research could promote healthy aging?
Right, so I guess I can start with my dream. My dream is, I guess it's probably pretty straightforward and maybe rather simple thinking, but my dream would be that we can continue to learn as much as possible and make progress about understanding the questions we're interested in and the processes that we're trying to understand, that we can continue doing this with the hope that at one point we will open enough doors and really understand how these processes are regulated, and more importantly, how they're misregulated, which then, as I said, opens the door for potentially intervening and improving these processes, whether that be during the aging process to prevent age-related diseases or other diseases that may or may not be age-related. This would be my dream.
Christy, your dream?
Yeah, I mean, my dream is very similar to Brian's, that through just, understanding the basic mechanisms of how cells work and how organisms work, that we're able to more fully understand the processes that go wrong during disease, as Brian says, either related to aging or just general diseases. Also, there's also relationships between genetic diseases that occur also in young individuals, and understanding these processes will allow us to come to treatment ideas, ways of treating these things that have gone wrong in cells to make people healthy again.
And the dream of the director?
Yeah.
So, with regard to my very own research, I'd say my dream is that we will see a paradigm shift in the future to which we can contribute with regard to the question, when does aging actually start? When does aging begin? Most people, if you go out in the street, ask somebody, so when do you think aging starts? We can even ask aging researchers, and there's a non-consensus there, and many will say, well, yeah, maybe when you're 30 or so. Some say, well, maybe at puberty. We would like to advance the idea that aging starts already in embryogenesis. In fact, the moment that we are conceived, the aging starts. And by training, I'm actually a developmental biologist. You mentioned that developmental biology is a topic here at IMB. And so we have moved from developmental biology into aging research because we believe that this process starts very early. And there's very good evidence now that aging processes that are connected to the lifestyle of your mother when she was pregnant with you will affect also the aging, whether you are healthy aging or not, whether you are subject to certain chronic age-related diseases or not, will already play out during the pregnancy of the parent. And we would like to contribute to this paradigm shift because it will also change the way that we may tackle the question of how can we promote healthy aging. Maybe not only starting age 30, 40, 50, but maybe much earlier. Maybe already during the pregnancy when you are expecting a child.
Aging is everywhere. I would like to know from you, all three, what do you do personally to stay healthy as long as possible? And what do you hope to reach? How many years in good health?
Well, for example, I exercise a lot. Well, not a lot. I work out. I go by bike every day to work and back. And there's a hill that I have to cross, so you have to actually do exercise. I take vitamin D regularly, which is advised. I take vitamin supplements. I try not to have meat more than twice a week. Have regular fish. Take fish oil pills, which are good with regard to unsaturated fatty acids and improve the aging of your vasculature, for example. So there are a number of things that one can do, even if the magic pill for aging is not yet on the market.
Okay. Brian?
My regime sounds fairly similar, but maybe a little bit more simplified. So yeah, basically I try to keep fit and do sport and keep moving as much as I can. I mean, even just simple things during the day, take the stairs, not the elevator, but also actively do sport and try to keep fit. As well, you know, watching my diet, making sure I eat the right things and not too much.
Vegetables?
Always vegetable, fruit, so whole foods is what I would concentrate on. And as you alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, you know, making sure that you get enough sleep and doing these basic things that we're always trained are important for our health and well-being. And I think, in my opinion, these are the things that work for me and make me feel best. And we don't know, will this contribute to healthy aging or not? I'm hoping it does, and there are many studies that say that this will help us go in the right direction. And then, as far as what age do I hope to reach, here I don't have a set number that I'm hoping to reach where I say success. You know, I've made it to 85. Okay, now I'm good.
And Christoph?
Well, age, I don't have a number also in my mind, but I guess an age where one can still enjoy life and without debilitating types of diseases, and staying also mind-wise clear and being able to contribute also something to the lives of others. I think that's very important. Our social life makes a big difference when we are getting older and not becoming lonely.
So my wife is 10 years younger than I am, so this is my motivation. So I have some catching up to do, rather than an absolute number.
Christy?
So, of course, Christoph and Brian have already provided a lot of great examples of what they're doing, but I just want to add that I think also as a scientist, you know, this very active thought process that we go through every single day is also keeping our minds from aging, and I think this is also really important. And for me personally, I'm an avid gardener, and I think, you know, growing as much of your own food as you can is also healthy because it keeps you active and outside and also decreases stress levels, but also then you know where your food comes from.
That leads me to my last question. The IMB and the CHA are research centers of hope, may I say that? Hope that the final years of our lives are enjoyable. Is that the way we take it home?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think that research and research institutes are and perhaps should be linked with hope. I think this is part of it. What I can concretely say is indeed here in Mainz and here at this institute, we are focusing on processes that we know are affecting the aging process and how we age and diseases associated with aging. So these basic problems that I talked about earlier, proteins working right, DNA not getting damaged, telomeres staying kept. This is what we're working on here, and I think that by working on these processes and really understanding them as fully as we can, that this then provides hope that we're going to open doors and windows for potential intervention to prevent age-related disease.
Chrissy?
I think the subjects of molecular biology and biochemistry and genetics, these are the sciences that are really invested in helping humanity.
So my hope is into the next generation also of scientists that we are training here. Your listeners cannot see it, but I'm a graying individual, and hence I'm looking forward already to sort of the next generation of scientists that we are training here and that have the opportunity at the IMB of getting their education and leading them into future aging research. So my hope is all about them being able to make the next big leap and step in promoting healthy aging.
So there is reason for hope in healthy aging, and it's located in Mainz. Thank you very much, Chrissy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Christoph.
thanks a lot.